Welcome to tonight's power rankings, and this might be the most that I've agonized over a power rankings in years. The first year that I did power rankings, I believe that was 2 years ago, was the first year I did power rankings. Most popular video of the week, that's still true to this day, and yet there would be nights where I was like, I don't know. And I'd put a team up and go, I don't know why they're in this spot. This is where the board told me to put them. I don't know. So I don't do that anymore. But looking at the board before doing this video, and as today's games went through, and I saw who was winning, and I was looking over records over the last couple weeks, I'm like, all right, I need to make a couple of market adjustments. A couple of major market adjustments. So that being said, those adjustments will show up on this board. They don't show up early, but when they show up, you'll know them. And there's going to be some fans going, wait, where's my team? Don't worry, I haven't forgot them. Number 31, back down to 31. This is where they belong. This is where Detroit belongs, right? So for Red Wings fans, don't worry. Everything's right in the universe. You're right back at number 31. There's no need to panic. There's no danger of moving up past 30. Back to 31. Number 30. And this is the lowest they've been in a while. They've been 31 before, though, so this isn't the lowest they've been, and that's LA. So the Kings out on the road doing as the Kings do. They've dropped to 30th on the overall power rankings. This is where we're into teams that aren't going to make the playoffs. Number 29, moving up 2 spots from last week. A victory enabled Ottawa to move up, and I thought they played relatively decently mostly this week. That's about all you can expect with Ottawa as well. They were okay this week. They were decent, right? Huh? Decent? That's what they aim for. That should be right. That should be on a banner right over the entrance. Ottawa, decent. And just a smiling picture of whoever. Doesn't matter, manager, coach, any of the players, thumbs up. We're decent. Number 28, dropping from number 25 last week. It was a rough week for New Jersey, right? Goaltending injuries, and then Schneider goes in tonight and just an absolute disaster against the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, yeah, New Jersey, they're back into the not going to make the playoffs category, and they're right where they kind of belong on the board. So those weeks of being higher up, those are over. They were 27, they were 25. They actually flirted with 23 at points over the last couple weeks. Now we're right back down to 28th. 27th, moving up 2 spots, mainly because teams ahead of them drop, and that's Anaheim. That being said, Anaheim has shown some signs of life. They did pass LA, so it's faint praise at this stage. Anaheim's too far back to really think about playoffs at this stage, and I would think that we'll see them selling off some assets sooner rather than later. I would imagine. I'm not sure what you sell. I know that Ryan Miller's name gets mentioned a lot. I'm not sure who might be looking at him. Maybe Toronto. Although there's a lot of things going on with Toronto, and I'm not sure that goaltending is necessarily where you start with fixing things with Toronto. Number 26, and dropping 3 spots from last week. And this is the thing. San Jose gets a pretty reputable week or two going, and then they fall right back down into it. So this week was a rough week for them, and that loss against Vancouver, pretty humiliating and pretty complete as well. Vancouver took them to school. And this is a team that has owned Vancouver for years. No matter how good and bad one or the other team is, it's normally just San Jose destroys them. So it was surprising to see how thorough it was tonight. Not necessarily Vancouver victory, but how thorough that was. So for San Jose, they are also in the better luck next year category. And so all those teams are together again. Isn't that nice? Number 25, moving up 2 spots from last week. 2 spots from last week. And there's some reason for hope. And who knew that Kovalchuk would be the reason for hope in Montreal? Am I right or am I right? Kovalchuk is the reason for optimism in Montreal. Now, there's other reasons as well. Carey Price has started to look like Carey Price. His numbers tonight weren't fantastic, but you know what? Vegas is pretty good when it comes to shooting the puck, so that's forgivable. And overall, Montreal's record's been decent enough over the last week or so. Just stay away from those 8 losses in a row when you're talking about the record. And it's not too bad. But for Montreal, we're likely looking at a team that doesn't make the playoffs either. Even with those wins and with things going relatively well for them over the last couple weeks, I still don't see them making the playoffs. I can't see it. They're too far back. And teams like Columbus and Philly aren't going to fall that far back. So that's a problem. Number 24, moving up 2 spots from last week. They move up 2 spots, and that's Buffalo. Buffalo, and I would not be using these magnets, which include the beloved Buffaslug. But the other magnet set isn't complete yet, so I haven't been able to replace this with the ones that I want to use. Until it's complete, I'm not going to be able to do that. But Buffalo moves up a couple of spots. They had a good week. Eichel had a 9-game point streak snap tonight. I didn't really penalize them for tonight's result. I didn't think that tonight's result proved that they belonged further down on this board. And that's something that I explain in these weekly videos as well, is that just because a team won and a team lost doesn't necessarily mean automatic movement for one, the other, or both. Sometimes it means I look at the board and go, yeah, no, everybody's fine. And when I looked at the board tonight, I went, nope, this overall picture needs to be changed. Buffalo was not part of that change. We haven't got to anybody that was part of that change. Number 23, moving down 2 spots from last week. Is this the lowest they've been? Yes, it's the lowest Nashville's been. So Nashville gets the win over Buffalo. They were 23 coming into today. They stay at 23. It's a troubling time for Nashville, where they bring in a new coach and the results have been kind of middling. And tonight against Buffalo, they had a really good start. There were some parts of that game that were kind of iffy. The really good news is Rinne had a really good game. If Rinne can keep that up, then Nashville has a chance. But it's a matter of Rinne being able to keep that up. That's where things get kind of tricky with Rinne at this stage of his career. All right, so Nashville, same spot, all that other wonderful stuff as to where they were at the start of the day. Number 22, moving up 2 spots from last week, 2. So the Rangers making inroads, a lot of it to do with Artemi Panarin. Let's be honest, without Artemi Panarin, without that addition during the summer, these guys are down in this range. They're where they are because Artemi Panarin's been fantastic. If Ryan Strome ends up getting a raise out of all this, he needs to give some money to Panarin, at the very least buy him dinner, even though Panarin makes a mint when it comes to money right now, because he's really pulled Strome with him. This is a team that's got 3 goaltenders still. Shesterkin starting tomorrow apparently, so let the games continue. And so far the 3 goalie rotation hasn't hurt the Rangers, but you can't keep it that way. So it'll be interesting to see what they pick up, because honestly, if the Rangers pick up somebody who can play on their roster right now, in exchange for, say, Georgiev, and Georgiev is very likely to be the one to go because Lundqvist has the no movement clause and all that other wonderful stuff, the Rangers could very well find themselves in a position to contend. The East is as daunting as it may have looked early. It hasn't looked that daunting lately. The Rangers took 4 points away from the Islanders this week, so the Islanders look a lot more vulnerable than they did a couple weeks ago. And we'll see what happens with the Rangers from here. But they're one of those dangerous teams to keep an eye on coming out of the break. Number 21. And dropping from number 15 last week. And outside of beating Vancouver 4-0 in a game that people will tell you Hellebuck stole, there are some troubling signs for Winnipeg. They find themselves currently outside the playoffs looking in. And they're definitely a bubble team that looks like they're breaking in the wrong direction. And Hellebuck's numbers, while he was fantastic against Vancouver, he has had his challenges this year as well. He got pulled in their last game, and of course that was against Tampa. People are going to be like, well, it's Tampa, so that's what happens. But still, for me, Winnipeg has kind of been a disappointment over the last, I'll say, month. And Laine needs to start scoring more goals. There's been talk about, hey, now he needs to shoot more. Right. And this is the thing. He's got more points. He gets the assists. And then when they start to struggle, it's like, hey, you should shoot more. So if you're Laine, you really can't win. Number 20. Same spot as they were last week. So some good parts and bad parts this week. And overall, Minnesota ends up in the same spot they were last week. During the week, they dropped as low as 22. I think they were as high as 19 during parts of this week. And they end up just being at the same spot they were last week. So again, we're not into a major adjustment, although Winnipeg does show major signs of adjustment with that 5-point drop and putting them behind Minnesota, for instance. So, yeah, Minnesota stays in the hunt at this stage, and that win over Dallas tonight was pretty all-powerful. Number 19, same spot as last week as well, is Philadelphia. So Philadelphia, rough spots. They're in a playoff spot. They've had some rough spots here and there. That being said, they are in a playoff spot, and they're winning enough to stay there. We'll see whether or not Carolina can knock them out of that spot tomorrow. The bad news for Philadelphia is that Columbus has just outplayed them so badly over the last couple of months that it's taken all of their hopes and dreams of having an easy ride to the playoffs, and they've dashed them. So Philadelphia is going to have to work pretty hard from here. Against LA tonight, they look good enough to win, and we'll see if they're able to continue that as we get to the All-Star break. Number 18, moving up from 22 last week, is Chicago. And Chicago is a scary team. Taves, 4 points tonight. Kane on the verge of 1,000 points. And Duncan Keith is quietly having a good season as well. Oh, and Corey Crawford has won their last 2 games, and he's looked pretty good. So, Chicago may be in the position at the deadline. They are close enough right now to the playoffs. They are above Nashville. They are above Minnesota in the standings. They're just behind Winnipeg. They're close enough that they may be looking to add at the deadline. I would not put it past Stan Bowman to look at where they're at in the standings and say, you know what, Kane's not getting any younger, Taves isn't getting any younger, Crawford certainly isn't getting any younger. As long as we can move money around, we might be able to add at the deadline. And then who knows what happens with the Hawks. They could be that team that just surprisingly makes the playoffs. And if they get there, they could definitely pull off an upset once they're there. Number 17, dropping from number 8 last week. So I talked about having a major market adjustment. Yeah, the Islanders. It's been a rough few weeks for the Islanders, and I have kept them up in this area for the last, I'll say, almost a month, where it's been all right. Well, yeah, they lost that game, but they won. They had a bounce back. They're playing well enough to stay roughly around 500 over the last month and a half, but I don't think that they're trending in the right direction. And blowing that lead against Washington this afternoon, just what a massive implosion that was. And clearly they miss Pelech. And I'm not sure if it's just the loss of Pelech, but you look at the numbers their goaltenders are putting up over the last, I'll say, month and a half. It's been kind of alarming because it's trending in the wrong direction. Something that we said right from the start of the year is, well, their goaltending's been excellent. So as long as their goaltending remains excellent, the Islanders should be able to make the playoffs no problem. The goaltending is no longer excellent. And they've started to lose their pace with the Washington Capitals that they had up until a couple weeks ago. They've fallen off the pace away from the Penguins, and now they have to start looking behind them at Columbus, behind them at Philadelphia, and saying, all right, we've got to stop the bleeding, because otherwise we could find ourselves in a position where we might be that team that misses the playoffs. And wouldn't that be a stunner, considering that huge point streak they had near the start of the season? Number 16, moving up from 18 last week. It is a conservative rise for them, and they're third in the division. I'm aware that Florida right now is third in the division. And they've had a good little run here. They beat Detroit to get into that number 3 spot, so you don't bump a team up when they beat Detroit. No offense to Detroit, but for me, when a team beats Detroit, I don't move them on the board, up or down. I just say, all right, so they beat Detroit. Now, if they lose to Detroit, that's a whole other story. But if you beat Detroit, odds are it doesn't really affect your standing. Because think of it this way. If Florida beats Detroit, and let's say Chicago's number 15, if you're a Chicago fan, are you going to say, oh yeah, Florida should definitely pass Chicago because they beat the Wings tonight? No. So me, just having watched as much hockey as I have this year, if your team beats Detroit, probably don't move up. And honestly, that's something that I consider is, who have they beaten? So when, for instance, Dallas goes through and beats LA, Anaheim, and then they lose against San Jose, I look and I go, okay, 30, 27, and 26. So that is something that I consider, and people who watched my NFL power rankings know that I do take that seriously as well, where the New England Patriots had a really soft schedule that first 8 weeks. I talked about it a lot. New England fans were like, hey, we won those games. Yeah, and then when they played tough teams, what happened? They were out right away. So, number 15, speaking of teams that have had kind of a schedules turned on them, Dallas. So dropping 1 spot from last week is Dallas. And they've lost 3 out of 4. And there are some signs that Dallas's offense is again becoming a problem. and maybe their defense. Heiskanen's out. We don't know for how long. And maybe their goaltending has started to erode just a little bit. I don't know. There's a lot of things with Dallas that I get concerned with, and it's why they've been around the middle of the pack for weeks now. It's why even with that 6-game winning streak, I left them right around the middle of the pack. And despite the losses, I'm keeping them around the middle of the pack. I think they're good enough to make the playoffs. I don't think they win a round when they get there. I think in the first round, I think they go out. I don't think they have the offense to get through any of the other teams they would play in the West. And that includes Colorado, despite Colorado having their own faults and flaws. Number 14, dropping from number 10 last week. It was a rough week for Arizona. And so the Coyotes find themselves at 14, which is the lowest they've been on a power rankings in quite some time. And I know there are Coyotes fans, I've seen the comment section, who are concerned that maybe this is a sign they're falling out of a playoff race. And now the words Taylor Hall curse have come up, as well as the Matt Duchene curse in Nashville, of course. I don't really believe in curses. I don't think that Taylor Hall going to Arizona is the reason why they've started losing more than they're winning. I think that they had an incredible run. I think they added Hall to try to prop that run up. I think John Chayka realized we need something else in that top 6 in order to maintain this. We can't just rely on Darcy Kemper. We can't just rely on only allowing a goal a game. And now that's started to become a problem. Ranta had a problem today with pucks. And Aiden Hill. I love Aiden Hill. I do. But you can't ride him as the starter for very long. So they need Kemper back, is what's going on with Arizona. We're seeing what happens when they don't have Darcy Kemper for an extended period. Number 13. And dropping one spot from last week. Calgary. So I saw a Flames fan that said that they were kind of scared of this week's power rankings. It was nice. Drop a one spot for Calgary. They don't score, which is a problem. As I mentioned with Dallas, their lack of scoring is a problem. But they're still number 3 in the division. So as much as we might look at this result tonight and say, oh, well, clearly they're not very good, I don't want to overreact. I think that while they've had some poor results recently, and I don't know that Riddick, having been played tonight, was necessarily the right. I would have played Talbot, but that's me. We'll see what they do coming out of the All-Star break. I'm still thinking that Calgary probably makes it. The one question I was asked once this week that I can remember, I think maybe twice, can Calgary win anything in the playoffs? And my answer is, right now, with the way that they're scoring, no. You have to be able to score goals in the playoffs in order to win the games. And they don't have a goaltender between Talbot or Riddick who's going to win a bunch of games 1-0. And that's the other thing that you need. So for them, they're in some trouble. But coming out of the break, their first game is against the Edmonton Oilers. So that should snap things back to where it should be. Number 12, dropping from number 4 last week. So last week I said Toronto had a bad week, sure, but they didn't have as bad of a week as some of the other teams that were in and around their area. That's why they moved up. Well, this week they made up for it. This week they had a pretty miserable week. And they ended it off in spectacular fashion against the Chicago Blackhawks. So looking at that and looking at how many goals they've been allowing over the last 3 weeks, they're not a top 10 team right now. They really aren't. That loss to Chicago tonight was just huge. And not only that, but the fact that they have to keep pulling Freddie Anderson, which tells you one of two things. Either Freddie's not playing well, or the defense in front of him just keeps allowing prime opportunities in front of him. And it's really kind of a mix of both. So Toronto has got to turn this around. They can't afford to wait until the trade deadline. If Kyle Dubas sits on his hands until trade deadline day, he's in trouble, because right now the Toronto Maple Leafs find themselves outside of a playoff spot. I don't want to overreact. To me, if they go from 4th on the power rankings to 18th, that's a complete and total overreaction. 12th is right about where I think they belong. They probably should have beaten Calgary the other night. So as bad as things looked against Chicago, they probably should have beaten Calgary the other night. They didn't. So I can't give them the benefit of that push they'd get from a victory, but at the same time, they haven't played well enough to justify being in the top 10. And that's where I was at tonight. There were teams that were in the top 10 where I looked at the board and I said, I can't justify those teams being in the top 10, and Toronto was one of them. Number 11, dropping from number 7 last week, the shocking Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, Gerard Gallant being out is just absolutely amazing news. I still don't understand it. And it's been explained why they did it. And I still don't get it. I honestly don't get it. And tonight against Montreal, they played well that last 2 minutes. But is that the real Vegas Golden Knights, or is that Montreal not being able to hold the lead? Look where Montreal is on the board. Is it a sign that Vegas is getting better? I know they played great against Ottawa. Ottawa had 1 win in 10 games going to that game. So, again, you've got to take everything with a grain of salt. So I dropped them to number 11. I didn't drop them as far as some people are going to think I should have, because they won their last game against Ottawa before this shootout loss against Montreal. So they got 3 points in their last 2 games. I can't overreact either way. So they do drop, but not as far as, again, as some people might think they should. Number 10, dropping 1 spot from last week, and boy, are they lucky. Carolina. Not a great week for Carolina, honestly. But I would put it ahead of Toronto's. I'd put it ahead of Vegas. I would also put it ahead of the week that the Arizona Coyotes had. I would put it ahead of the week that Dallas had. So it was not a great week for Carolina, but there wasn't really a team, and right now there's a couple of fan bases going, wait, Shannon dropped the magnet, right? Nope. Carolina, for me, is still just top 10. And we may and again, looking forward to coming out of the break, watch Florida, watch Chicago, because these teams have put together quite the strings lately. And the Islanders have to bounce back, right? This can't continue. This slide can't continue. So I would look for bounce backs from Chicago, from Florida, and maybe from the Winnipeg Jets as well. We'll see tomorrow if the Jets are able to bounce back and put themselves in a better position going into the break. But for Carolina, they're top 10. Number 9, moving up from 16 last week, Vancouver. They've won 8 in a row at home. And the one thing that has been holding them back on the power rankings board has been they've won 11 out of 14. The 3 that they've lost have been lopsided losses. Now, I didn't penalize them on the board for the loss to Winnipeg because they played very well. So again, while people, in the review, they're like, "Oh, Shannon doesn't give Vancouver credit." I did on the board. I didn't penalize them for that result on the board. And as you can see, they're 12 spots ahead of Winnipeg currently on the board, even though Winnipeg beat them this week. So Vancouver's playing very, very well. I saw that firsthand against Arizona, and then tonight against San Jose. What's impressing me about Vancouver is it's a complete and total buy-in from everybody on the team. So while there's some fans who are saying, hey, they're playing really well and Louis Eriksson's getting good ice time, that's related. What's related is that Louis Eriksson has bought into everything that's being sold by Travis Green. He's not trying to score a bunch of goals. He's not trying to live up to his contract. He's just playing the best game he can. So all of the criticisms that have been heaped on Jim Benning and on Louis Eriksson over the last year plus, of especially the last year plus, right now Eriksson's silencing some of those critics. He'll never justify that contract. It's not going to happen. However, he is playing a very solid role, and he is just fitting in very well on that line. So Vancouver doesn't need to change anything. All 4 lines are working. The defensive pairs are odd. Even sitting there and watching them and going, wow, Stetcher and Edler, huh? That's weird. And Fantenberg is with Myers, and you got, Hughes and Tanev works. Wait, they got Hughes playing with Myers on this shift? Like, they do get moved around, but it works. So whatever Travis Green's doing right now, it works. Vancouver's first in the division. Number 8, moving up from 17 last week. Yeah, so the Oilers won the only 2 games they played this week, and they won them in big fashion. So the Oilers, people are going to say I've got them too high up on the board. I get it. I understand. The thing is, I looked at this board today and I said, all right, who's actually playing better? And Mike Smith has a 5-game winning streak right now. And when Mike Smith's in net, the Oilers are a pretty good team. And Josh Archibald has started putting up some points. Riley Sheahan had a bunch of points today. There are a lot of players for the Oilers who are putting up points. And what's really impressive with the Oilers is it's not McDavid. It's not McDavid. It's not Draisaitl. that are getting them these wins. It's everybody. So much like Vancouver, it's a buy-in from all four lines. And a maligned defense in Edmonton isn't playing too badly right now. So we'll see whether or not the Oilers can maintain this. But for right now, for this week, they're number 8. Keep in mind, I will do a power rankings on Thursday when we officially hit, or on Wednesday night. No, I'll do it Thursday morning when we officially hit the All-Star break. We'll look at where everybody is at that point. And then I don't do a power rankings until the following Saturday. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to figure out a way to make sure that teams that aren't playing between now and Thursday are properly protected from huge drops or rises and that kind of thing. And then if it doesn't work, Thursday I'll do something else. So, and then next week for power rankings on Saturday, I will likely do something completely different. I want to do something creative because we'll be in California. So I want to make sure it's something different. If I can do something outside, bonus. Because in California, it's supposed to be 23 degrees Celsius. Here it's supposed to be 7 and raining. So we go from 7 and raining here to 23 degrees and sunny there. I want to take advantage of that while I'm in it. Number 7. Moving up from 13 last week. This is another one of those teams that had a pretty good week. And I said, all right, Colorado, really good game against the St. Louis Blues. Now, Colorado lost against Dallas this week. Yes. But really, Colorado had a pretty good week. And so I looked at this board, and it was a matter of trying to find teams that I could say, okay, I do believe this is a top row team. And it was tricky because I'm like, okay, the Oilers and the Canucks, I don't think are there yet. The Avs have been there before, and the Avs right now are sitting at second in the division. They're the only team in the division that I think has any hope of catching St. Louis. Maybe. And it's just a maybe. They pulled within 8 points of St. Louis with the victory today. So it's only a maybe. But Makar seems to be rounding back into form. And while I still think Francouz should be played more, Grubauer's been good enough to get victories. And McKinnon's still putting up a bunch of points because it's all he does. And so for all those reasons, I felt that the bump up for Colorado works. Number 6. Moving up from 11 last week. I don't know that these guys have ever been higher. I don't know that Columbus has ever been number 6 on a power rankings. I know last year they had some good runs. I know I think it was 2 years ago they had that 17-game winning streak or 18, something like that. They may have been higher at that point. But this has been the most impressive gradual move up that I think they've ever had. It's been fascinating to watch. Because a Columbus team that started out winning games and eking out victories, and we'd see a shootout and some overtime, and there was some luck involved, and you go, they can't rely on that every night. And then Korpisalo gets hurt, and you go, they're done. They've become really one of the best teams in the league, and they're winning in regulation regularly. And that was my biggest knock on them, was they weren't winning in regulation. Well, they've started doing that, and there's been some dominant victories as well. So Columbus is officially a team that, once again, you don't want to face in the first round of the playoffs. And right now, they're in the playoffs. They are the number 1 wild card. They'd play Boston. I will come out and say that if the playoffs started tomorrow and Columbus played Boston, they'd beat Boston. I think in 6. I think based on what happened between Boston and Columbus last year, I think Columbus can use that in the locker room and come out and take Boston down. That being said, number 5 on the power rankings this week, moving up 1 spot from last week, is Boston. So the Boston Bruins move up mainly because of that victory over Pittsburgh. That was a really impressive victory over Pittsburgh. And it made me doubt where some teams were on this power rankings. It did. But by the end of the week, I'm like, nah, 5 is fine. And we are out of the, I need to make a market correction. The market correction, the highest market correction was here at 6, I guess. Although coming into today, Columbus wasn't far below 6. And the farthest down the market correction gets is the Islanders at 17. Everything else in between I felt was pretty accurate. Because again, with parity being as it is, these teams are all so close to each other. But number 5 is Boston. I don't see them as a top 3 team, but they've been playing better. And tomorrow they have another shot at Pittsburgh. If they can beat Pittsburgh again, they'll move up again. That being said, at number 4, dropping from number 3, is Tampa. So coming out of that 10-game winning streak, you had to expect a little bit of a letdown, and that's kind of happened. But Tampa Bay going into the break still had a pretty nice send-off going into the break, didn't they? So we'll see whether or not Tampa is legitimately back in the second half, which is already started, but a lot of people think the second half's after the All-Star break. So we'll see, right? Because they're close enough to Boston that it's worth talking about. And yet they're far enough behind that it still seems like it's a remote possibility that they catch the Bruins. But Boston can't keep losing in overtime and in regulation because Tampa will catch them. So that's the thing. It's in Boston's hands. But yeah, so Tampa Bay drops one spot this week. Number 3, moving up 2 spots from where they were last week, is the Washington Ovechkins. Yeah, Ovechkin back-to-back hat tricks, huh? What else is there to say right now? The Capitals are playing very well. Oh, and that Samsonov kid, not a bad goaltender. Samsonov is the best goaltender in Washington. Repeat after me, Samsonov is the best goaltender in Washington. So when people ask, what are they going to do with Holtby? The answer is, they don't need to do anything. They don't need Holtby if Samsonov is able to play this way. The silly thing is, I've seen people say, oh, they can't let go of Holtby. That'd be like with Pittsburgh with Matt Murray. No. Matt Murray came into the league without a lot of fanfare. Matt Murray came into the league with nobody knowing what to expect. Ilya Samsonov, I should say, came into the league with a ton of fanfare, and everybody knew this guy was going to be the starter and that he was going to be a star in this league. We just didn't realize he was ready now. So the idea that he'd need a couple of years in the AHL, maybe, no. There's a reason Phoenix Copley got waived before the season started, and it's Samsonov is that good, not that Copley's not that bad. So Holtby's, as far as I can see, probably done as a Capital, because he's being outplayed badly by this kid. Which, again, with Matt Murray, it didn't really happen in Pittsburgh. You'd see injuries back and forth, but Murray and Fleury were usually pretty close in numbers. And, yeah, it's a totally different situation. If they let go of Holtby, I don't think they have a whole lot to worry about in terms of Samsonov falling back. Number 2. I agonized over this. I've had St. Louis at number 1 this week. I have. Now, St. Louis lost against Colorado today, and I looked at that and I said, St. Louis has had an excellent run for quite a while, and they've been up at or near the top for a long while. So they're at 4, 4, 2, 1, 2, 2, and they're 2 again this week, which means people are like, wait a minute, seriously? Yeah, see, at number 1, I've got the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, Penguins lost this week against Boston. St. Louis lost this week against Colorado. To my thinking, they both lost against pretty strong rivals, and I didn't see a reason to penalize them below the Capitals, to penalize them below Tampa, who had an iffy week results-wise, definitely not below Boston. So then it's competition between the two of them. Coming into today, I had St. Louis at number 1. When they lost against Colorado, I dropped them down to number 2, and I put Pittsburgh back up to number 1. Pittsburgh is a scary team right now. That being said, again, we'll see what happens with them tomorrow against Boston. If Boston beats Pittsburgh again, Pittsburgh will drop to number 2 tomorrow night. The problem is, of course, I don't do power rankings videos every day. I would think there'd be a law of diminishing returns if I did. Imagine a power rankings video every day. My God. People would not like that at all. And rightfully so, because it would make everything ridiculous. But right now, I do think Pittsburgh's playing the best hockey in the league. I think that while Jari, I think, has overachieved to some level so far, and I expect his numbers to come down a little bit, not that much. And Pittsburgh has been one heck of an impressive franchise for a long time. And this year has been no different. So there you go. Your power rankings for January 18th of 2020. Your third power rankings of 2020, and all 3 weeks, Pittsburgh's been number 1. So there you go. We'll see how things turn out next week. Well, on Thursday, and then on next Saturday, I'll do something else that's going to be fun. That being said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always, which people always do. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. And it's going to be an interesting ride, I think, through the All-Star break. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.